Happy Halloween, everybody! I wish I could say we landed on an especially spooky book for the holiday, but despite the giant Muppet Monster arm on the cover, which never shows up in the book by the by, this is more of a supernatural adventure than an outright horror story. Less Are You Afraid of the Dark and more Disney's So Weird. Actually, it's a lot like a lot of things, but we'll get to that later. Our protagonist this time around is Matt Amsterdam. Hell of a last name there. And he lives in quite an unconventional family by Goosebumps standards. He's 12, the youngest of 3, and his father passed away when he was a baby. Matt's mother works 2 jobs, bouncing back and forth being a computer instructor and a law firm secretary. As she's barely home, we have a latchkey kids situation with Matt, his sister Pam, and his brother Greg taking care of themselves and making their own meals. It's not that weird of a family structure, which is why it feels so weird here. This is only our second truly deceased parent in the series, and our first single mom. And after dozens and dozens of white suburban nuclear families with 2 heterosexual parents and 2.5 children, even a single mom situation feels oddly progressive for Stein. Don't get too attached, we aren't going to be spending a lot of time with them, just, it's interesting. Matt lives in a very tiny room in a fairly large house. A house large enough for a sizable guest room that only gets used once a year when the grandparents come over for Christmas. Matt argues, rightfully in my opinion, that the guest room should be his bedroom and his Japanese apartment-sized room should be the guest room, but Mom is having none of it. Frustrated, that night Matt sneaks into the guest room and goes to bed there. And then the weird stuff happens. Like, the supernatural plot kicks in on page 14, we are out of the gate early on this one. When Matt wakes up, something is very, very wrong. Looking in the mirror, he discovers that he's now an older teenager. And going downstairs, Pam and Greg are now younger than him, preteens. Matt is confused and panicking, but Mom and the siblings are acting as if this is the normal state of affairs. Despite his protests, his mother demands he get in the car, where she drives him to the local high school. Now, Matt has no memories of this reality. He doesn't know his schedule or where his locker is, and he's definitely not ready for these advanced classes. It was an English class, alright, but we weren't reading comic books. We were reading a book called Anna Karenina. First of all, this book is about 10,000 pages long. Second, everybody else has read it, and I hadn't. Third, even if I tried to read it, I wouldn't understand what was going on in a million years. I'm conflicted because, stick it to the Western canon, but also, shut up, R.L. Stein. After being a klutz in PE class, Matt realizes, hey, wait, what am I doing? And he walks out of school. As he steps out, he has a meet-cute with a 12-year-old girl, accidentally knocking her over. She's fine, they have a good laugh over it, and she introduces herself as Lacey. Matt returns home and spends the rest of the day watching TV, having no idea what else to do. He decides to sleep once again in the guest room, and when he wakes up, he finds he's reverted back to his 12-year-old body. Hooray! But when he goes downstairs, he discovers that his family has changed once again. Now he's an only child, and he has a completely new mother and a still living father. They seem nice, but Matt has zero cool. You're not my real mother, and my father is dead. There's really not much to Matt's character here. If he has one consistent trait in this book, it's his inability to roll with the punches. Yes, freaky things are happening. Every time you fall asleep in the guest room, you wake up in a different reality. That's definitely weird. But at some point, you expect Matt to go, alright, screaming about it isn't getting me anywhere. Let's pretend I'm a part of this alternate dimension and see what I can figure out. That just never happens. His alternate parents force him to go to school, which is the right grade this time, if the wrong building. And once again, he's confused about class schedules. He sees that girl again, Lacey, and decides to visit her during her lunch break. But as he's munching on a ketchup and bologna sandwich, 2 boys enter the scene. 2 guys were walking towards us. They were tough-looking guys with black jeans and black t-shirts. One wore a blue bandana around his head. The other had ripped the sleeves of his t-shirt to show his beefy arms. They headed straight for us. One of the guys in black pointed at me. There he is, he shouted. Get him! So, for no clear reason, Matt gets chased around by these two Sha-Na-Na rejects. With Lacey's help, he manages to get away and get back home, skipping school once again. He's starting to realize that sleeping in the guest room is probably what's causing this, so off to bed he goes. When he wakes up, he finds he's now 8 years old and has a huge family that are all performers at the circus. They even have a monkey. Come on, Matt, you could at least try to have fun with this one. No? Just gonna pout? Fine, Killjoy. Okay, yes, actually, circuses suck. And Matt's new dad forces Matt to practice routines with the lion Hercules. This ends up saving Matt, however, as those two greaser punks show up again to try and grab him. But Matt keeps the lion between him and them and manages to escape. If it seems like I'm really flying through these realities, trust me, the book is too. We've seen 4 of them and we're only at the halfway point. Matt next wakes up as an old man, so he's all LOL nope and goes right back to bed. Then he wakes up as a 7-foot-tall lizard monster who eats metal. Driven less by human intelligence and more by monstrous instinct, Matt goes on a mini rampage, wrecking a few cars before those punks and Lacey show up. They throw a net over him and drag him to a caged cell in an abandoned house. Matt thrashes around a bit before passing out for the first time not in the guest room. When he wakes up, he's a teenager again. Fine, he'll take it. And Lacey and her 2 companions explain what the deal is. These 3 are the reality police. It seems that, while Matt was asleep in the guest room, a reality portal opened, and Matt fell through it. Every time he goes to sleep, he wakes up in a completely different reality. And that goes against reality law or something. So it used to be whenever Matt slept in the guest room, but I guess now he can sleep anywhere and cause his effect. That's kind of weak sauce, but I'll touch on that again later. It's not clear what effect this is having on the universe, if this is going to destroy all realities or whatever, but the only solution the reality police can think of is to have Matt go to sleep forever via a magic potion. I mean, they say it's a magic potion, they're probably just going to kill him. The reality police step out to prepare, and still trapped in his cell, Matt only has one option to save himself. Fall asleep again, and hope the next reality gives him some advantage. And it works. When he wakes up, he finds he's been turned into a squirrel. Careful, Matt. I've seen Sword in the Stone. Human boys turned into squirrels tend to break a lot of hearts. Matt makes his way back home and finds his original mother and siblings are there, just in a reality where he wasn't born. Matt's plan is to fall asleep in his own bed. He somehow figures that sleeping where he's supposed to will reset reality. There's zero basis for that assumption, but sure. Squirrel doesn't work for that, however, so Matt falls asleep outside and wakes up human again. But with differences. What a relief! I was a 12-year-old boy again, but I still wasn't my old self. I was a very, very chubby boy. A real blimp. No wonder the tree branch didn't hold me. Really, Stein? We're doing this shit again? Oh, there's nothing more scary than being overweight. Oh, fuck you. Again, in this reality, Matt doesn't live in this house, so he has to wait until night, break in, and sneak into his old room. He falls asleep there and wakes up to find everything has returned to normal. Yay! Later, his mom approaches him. Hey, kiddo, I thought about it, and you're right. Starting tonight, you are now sleeping in the guest room. Uh-oh. And that's the end of the book. I didn't hate it. It was alright. It felt incomplete in a weird way. The rules of this premise break apart in the second half. It really did seem that sleeping in the guest room was what triggered the change in reality, but then it just becomes whenever Matt falls asleep. Doesn't matter where. I feel like the story loses a lot of the tension with this change. Trying to escape the reality police is a lot easier when you can just take a nap wherever, instead of having to rush back to the guest room. The reality police themselves also feel kinda off. Why are they children? Why are they dressed like extras from Grease? You expect them to be more, government agent or police-like. The TV show adaptation does this, making them straight up Men in Black. I could see the reality police in the book working if they were like shape-shifting aliens who took different forms and dressed to blend in with the current reality, but nah, they're just looking for the Happy Days convention. Children could work if you changed what they were, like maybe they're reality explorers, a bunch of extra-dimensional rich kids who act as tourists in these dimensions and are upset that Matt is shaking up their vacation. It could be a lot of things. I just don't think, as is, the reality police are very cohesive antagonists. But mostly the problem is in the pacing. In 118 pages, we fly through 9 different realities, giving us very little space to really soak in any of them. Matt reacts the same way each time, in total panic mode, screaming at whatever form his parents take this time around, long after it should be clear that this doesn't work. You just want the book to slow down, for Matt to be accepting of his situation, so we can really stew in the circus reality, or the old man reality, or lizard monster reality. I think what's wrong here isn't so much what's on the page, but a mismatch of the premise and the format. This really doesn't work as one short book. This should be a whole series, a 12 to 62 young adult paperback series with each book dedicated to Matt waking up in a different reality, having an adventure there, then making his way back to the guest room and hope that this next sleep will be the one that brings him home. And imagine what a good author could do with that premise. The comedy high of navigating a everybody speaks in opposites reality or something. The deep sadness of finding a reality where a deceased loved one is still alive and debating if you should move on. And imagine all the young eggs that would crack in the inevitable Matt wakes up as a girl book. In a longer series format, you can inject a certain tension by having it be that if, say, Matt falls asleep outside of the guest room, he'd be locked in his present reality forever. So he has to decide if he wants to settle here, or roll the dice again and hope it brings him back home. And getting to that room could be easy or hard to do depending on that reality, not to mention the reality police, whatever form they take, being in hot pursuit. I suppose it feels natural as a series because there's been a lot of stuff made before and after this book that this book is quite evocative of. Waking up in a different body and having to get to grips with your new reality over and over again, that's Quantum Leap. Traveling through alternate dimensions, hoping you find your way home to your own dimension while being pursued by another group of reality travelers, that's Sliders, baby. As for things that came after the book, an innocuous spare bedroom with supernatural reality-bending properties that has to be maintained by a clandestine organization, this could be right out of the pages of the SCP Foundation. Or, if you prefer, the SCP Foundation's high-quality video game plagiarized knockoff, Control. I'm not implying that this book is ripping off anything, or that anything is ripping off this book, but that Stein found the pulse of an idea that really tickles the imagination. He tapped into something that other creators have realized the potential of, and have drawn really interesting speculative fiction from. And then Stein made the most inefficient version of that. Not a bad version, per se, but a tiny book with an inflexible protagonist, muddy antagonists, and no time to really enjoy its concept. I suppose just saying it should have been a series isn't much of a rewrite. So if this story has to be done in one tiny children's book, here's what I'd adjust. 1. Cut things down to 3 alternate realities so they each have more time to breathe. Let's go with teenager reality, circus reality, and squirrel reality. Those seem to be the most fun, and they kind of have a natural escalation. 2. Retool the reality police. Scary Men in Black work just fine for this. 3. Give the solution some setup. Matt returning to his reality by sleeping in his own bed is just a random guess, not based on anything. Maybe it's something he overhears from the reality police. It could be a lot of things. Yeah, you could do all that. Or you could make it the series it's begging to be. I know that's not fair. It's not like Stein had the time for a new series, especially with his secret stable of ghostwriters spread as thin as they were. Well, anyway. Okay book that fails to reach its full potential. I give Don't Go to Sleep a Peach Pit out of 10.
Bye.